Most people evaluate a job offer by looking at salary. If the number goes up, they assume they are moving forward financially. What is often ignored is that the job itself can quietly consume a large portion of that income. For many workers, commuting is not a neutral necessity. It is a recurring cost structure that can remove up to $15,000 a year from their effective earnings. The problem is not limited to fuel or transit tickets. Commuting creates a chain of expenses and time losses that are rarely calculated together. Because these costs are fragmented and spread across the week, they feel manageable. Individually, none of them look like a mistake. Collectively, they change the real value of the job. Most people believe they are doing everything right. They chose a stable position. They accepted a higher salary to justify a longer commute. They optimized for career growth. What they usually do not do is calculate the net financial impact of commuting beyond the obvious. This leads to a systematic error, evaluating income without subtracting the full cost of earning it. Start with direct expenses. A moderate commute of 40 miles round trip, 5 days a week, adds up to roughly 10,000 miles per year. At a conservative all-in vehicle cost of $0.60 per mile, fuel, maintenance, depreciation, that alone is $6,000 annually. Public transit is often cheaper, but still significant. Monthly passes, parking, and last-mile transport can easily exceed $2,000 to $3,000 per year. Then come indirect costs. Commuting increases spending around the workday. Meals are purchased instead of prepared. Coffee is bought instead of made at home. Convenience replaces planning because time is constrained. An extra $12 per workday on food and small purchases adds another $3,000 per year. This is not luxury spending, it is structural. Time is the largest hidden cost. A 1 hour daily commute equals roughly 250 hours per year. That is more than 6 full work weeks. This time is rarely valued financially, even though it directly limits flexibility. It reduces the ability to cook, exercise, manage finances, or pursue additional income streams. If that time were valued at even $25 per hour, the opportunity cost exceeds $6,000 annually. Most people assign it a value of zero. Add these numbers together: $6,000 in transportation, $3,000 in convenience spending, $6,000 in lost time value. The total approaches $15,000 per year. This calculation does not include stress-related health costs, increased childcare expenses due to rigid schedules, or higher housing costs tied to job location. The core issue is not commuting itself. It is that commuting costs are treated as unavoidable background noise instead of a financial variable. Because these costs are spread out and normalized, they rarely trigger a reassessment of the job's real value. People compare gross salaries, not net outcomes. At this stage, the goal is not to argue that everyone should quit their job or work remotely. It is to recognize that many employment decisions are made with incomplete financial data. Until commuting is evaluated as part of the job's cost structure, people will continue to believe they are earning more while keeping less. This gap between perceived income and actual financial progress is where the commuter trap begins. To understand why the commuter trap persists, it is necessary to look at how income and work-related costs are structured in everyday life. Most people experience income as a fixed monthly number. Commuting costs, in contrast, are fragmented into many small categories: fuel, parking, transit passes, meals, time, and convenience purchases. Because no single expense looks extreme, the total impact is rarely evaluated as a system. This fragmentation is reinforced by behavior. Commuting decisions are usually made once and then left untouched for years. After accepting a job, the commute becomes routine. Costs are normalized and no longer questioned. Even when fuel prices rise or schedules become more demanding, the underlying structure remains the same. People adapt by spending more for convenience rather than reassessing the setup. Another driver is the absence of a clear framework for valuing time. Time lost to commuting is often treated as unavoidable and therefore assigned no monetary value. This creates a distorted picture of job efficiency. A salary is evaluated on an annual basis, while time is evaluated emotionally. This mismatch leads to decisions that look rational on paper but are inefficient in practice. Consider a common scenario. Two jobs offer similar roles. Job A pays $85,000 and requires a daily commute of 90 minutes round trip. Job B pays $75,000 and allows remote work 3 days per week with a short commute on the remaining days. On the surface, Job A looks better. Many people focus on the $10,000 salary difference and stop there. When costs are included, the picture changes. Job A requires roughly 375 commuting hours per year. Job B requires closer to 120. If time is valued conservatively at $30 per hour, Job A carries an implicit time cost of $11,250 versus $3,600 for Job B. Add transportation and workday spending, and the lower paying job often produces a higher net outcome. Without a system to evaluate this, the decision defaults to salary comparison. Standard advice does not address this effectively. Suggestions like budget better, pack lunch, or drive a more efficient car treat symptoms rather than structure. These actions may reduce costs slightly, but they do not change the core dynamic. The commute still consumes time, still constrains behavior, and still generates spending pressure. Optimization within a bad structure has limited impact. Another common recommendation is to negotiate a higher salary to offset commuting. This often fails for two reasons. First, salary increases are taxed, while many commuting costs are paid with after-tax dollars. A $5,000 raise may result in $500 net, while costs rise at the full amount. Second, higher salaries tend to increase expectations. Longer hours, more presence, more availability, which can intensify the commute-related burden rather than reduce it. The deeper issue is that most people lack a decision framework that treats work as a cost-generating system, not just a source of income. Jobs are evaluated emotionally, socially, and symbolically. The financial mechanics are secondary. As long as commuting is treated as an external inconvenience instead of an internal cost, the same pattern will repeat. The commuter trap is not caused by laziness or poor planning. It is the result of structural blind spots in how employment decisions are evaluated. Without a method to aggregate costs and time into a single view, people continue to optimize the wrong variable and wonder why higher salaries do not translate into better financial outcomes. The first major mistake is evaluating jobs using gross salary instead of net financial impact. Most people compare offers by looking at the top line number and assuming that higher pay automatically means higher wealth. This ignores commuting as a recurring cost system when transportation, food, time, and flexibility losses are excluded from the calculation. The job appears more valuable than it actually is. The second mistake is treating commuting costs as fixed and unavoidable. Fuel, parking, transit passes, and workday spending are accepted as just part of life. Because these costs are spread across many categories, they are rarely challenged together. Over time, they become invisible. This leads people to optimize around the commute rather than questioning whether the commute itself is financially rational. A third mistake is underpricing time. Many people implicitly value their commuting time at zero. In financial terms, this is a significant error. Time is not only a quality of life issue, it is a constraint on earning capacity and cost control. Hours spent commuting cannot be used for skill development, side income, health maintenance, or financial planning. This lost optionality compounds over years. To see the long-term impact, consider a conservative projection. Assume a worker loses $12,000 per year in combined commuting-related costs and time value. Over 5 years, that equals $60,000. Over 10 years, $120,000. Over 20 years, $240,000. These figures exclude inflation and assume costs remain flat, which is unlikely. Fuel prices, vehicle costs, and urban congestion tend to increase over time. Now add opportunity cost. If $12,000 per year were invested at a moderate 5% annual return, the outcome changes materially. After 10 years, those annual losses represent roughly $155,000 in foregone capital. After 20 years, the figure approaches $400,000. This difference is not driven by aggressive investing. It is driven by structural inefficiency in how work is set up. To illustrate that income is not the decisive factor. Compare two scenarios. Worker A earns $100,000 but commutes long hours and absorbs $15,000 per year in related costs. Worker B earns $85,000 with minimal commuting and better time flexibility, losing only $4,000 per year. Over 10 years, worker B often accumulates more investable capital despite earning less on paper. The gap is created by structure, not effort. Another long-term consequence is lifestyle lock-in. High commuting costs force higher ongoing income requirements. This reduces risk tolerance and flexibility. People stay in jobs they dislike because the cost of switching appears too high. This is not a psychological issue. It is a financial constraint created by recurring expenses tied to the commute. The conclusion is straightforward. The commuter trap does not exist because people earn too little. It exists because employment decisions are made without fully accounting for the costs required to maintain that employment. Over time, this error compounds quietly, turning higher salaries into lower net progress. The practical solution to the commuter trap is not to eliminate work or chase higher salaries. It is to treat commuting as a controllable financial variable and integrate it directly into employment decisions. This requires shifting from salary-based thinking to net value thinking. The first step is to calculate the true annual cost of commuting. This includes three components. The first is direct transportation cost: fuel, vehicle wear, maintenance, insurance differences, parking, or transit passes. A conservative estimate for car travel is 12.5 per mile. The second component is workday spending caused by time constraints, meals, coffee, convenience purchases, and occasional services. The third component is time. Assigning a value to time does not mean billing yourself by the hour. It means acknowledging opportunity cost. A practical approach is to value commuting time at 50% of your hourly wage. Once these numbers are calculated, they become part of the job's cost structure. Salary is no longer viewed in isolation. Instead, compare roles using net outcome, salary minus commuting costs, and time loss. This immediately changes how options rank without introducing risk or speculation. The second step is structural adjustment. There are several low-risk levers that reduce commuting cost without destabilizing income. Partial remote work is one of the most effective, reducing commuting days from 5 to 3 cuts both direct costs and time loss by 40%. Flexible hours can reduce peak travel expenses and stress-related spending. Even small changes, such as one remote day per week, have measurable annual impact. Another lever is geographic arbitrage within the same role. Relocating closer to work or choosing roles in lower cost areas often produces better net results than chasing higher pay in expensive job centers. This is not about downsizing lifestyle. It is about aligning housing, work, and time into a coherent system. The third step is setting a commuting cost ceiling. Just as people set limits for rent or debt, commuting should have a defined maximum share of income. A practical benchmark is keeping total commuting-related costs below 10% of gross income. When a role exceeds this threshold, it should trigger reassessment, not adaptation. This solution is stable because it does not depend on external market conditions. It does not require new skills, side businesses, or financial products. It reduces recurring expenses and frees time, both of which improve resilience. Unlike salary increases, which can be reversed or taxed heavily, reduced commuting costs are permanent improvements to cash flow. Importantly, this approach avoids extreme decisions. It does not assume that everyone can work remotely or move immediately. It provides a framework for gradual improvement. Each adjustment, one fewer commute day, a shorter distance, a different schedule, has a measurable effect. Over time, the system reinforces itself. Lower commuting costs increase savings capacity. More available time improves planning and reduces convenience spending. Together, these changes increase net financial efficiency without increasing risk. The commuter trap loses power not through sacrifice, but through structural correction. When the full picture is assembled, the commuter trap becomes a structural problem rather than a personal failure. The financial mistake is not choosing to work, commute, or pursue career growth. It is evaluating employment using salary alone while ignoring the recurring costs required to sustain that salary. Once commuting is treated as part of the job's cost, decision making becomes clearer and more consistent. The complete system has four steps. First, measure the true annual cost of commuting. This includes transportation expenses, workday spending caused by time pressure, and the opportunity cost of time. These values should be calculated conservatively and reviewed annually, just like rent or insurance. Without this number, comparisons between jobs remain incomplete. Second, convert salary into net employment income. This means subtracting commuting costs from gross pay to understand what the job actually produces. Two roles with different salaries often reverse order when evaluated this way. This step removes illusion and replaces it with arithmetic. Third, apply a structural rule. Commuting costs should not exceed a defined share of income. A practical ceiling is 10% of gross pay. When a role crosses that threshold, the response should be structural adjustment, not adaptation. This may involve reducing commuting days, changing schedules, or reassessing location. The rule exists to prevent gradual erosion of financial efficiency. Fourth, prioritize time flexibility as a financial asset. Time recovered from commuting increases control over spending and planning. This is not abstract. More time directly reduces convenience spending and improves financial execution. Now consider outcomes over time. After 1 year, the impact is primarily visible in cash flow. Even modest reductions, one remote day per week or a shorter commute, often recover $3,000, $5,000 annually when transportation, food, and time are included. Financial stress around weekdays decreases because daily routines are less constrained. After 5 years, the effect becomes cumulative. Assuming $4,000 per year redirected to savings or investment at a moderate return, the total benefit approaches 25,000 to 30,000. More importantly, financial decisions feel less reactive. Employment changes become easier because fixed costs are lower. After 10 years, the difference is structural. Lower recurring costs create optionality. People can accept better roles, reduce hours, or take calculated risks because their baseline expenses are controlled. Depending on consistency, the long-term benefit can exceed $70,000, $100,000 without any increase in salary. What should be done now is straightforward. Calculate your current annual commuting cost in one document. Convert your salary into net employment income. Set a commuting cost ceiling and compare it to your current situation. Identify one structural change that reduces this cost within the next 12 months. This process does not require drastic action, it requires clarity. The commuter trap persists because costs are fragmented and normalized. When they are aggregated and treated as part of the job, the trap weakens. The final conclusion is simple. Financial progress is not only determined by how much you earn, but by how efficiently your work converts income into usable capital and time. When commuting is evaluated correctly, better decisions follow naturally.